Hello, denizens. Welcome to another journey into network television's past, when there actually was network television. It's a real mess out there now. Frankly, way too much content and too much fragmentation between the networks and streaming services and cable and YouTube and everywhere. That's why it's such comfort to turn to my old TV guides and its three-channel universe with a smattering of PBS and cable shows. This time around, our journey takes us to 1982. I've already taken a sneak peek, and you are really going to enjoy this show. But first, let's go over the major historical events that shaped 1982. Malaysia and Singapore clocks are adjusted to the same time zone. Wano Koivisto is elected president of Finland. The first computer virus, the Elk Cloner, written by 15-year-old Rich Skrenta, is found. Thanks, Rich. Klaus von Bülow is found guilty of the attempted murder of his wife. Chariots of Fire wins Best Picture. Invasion of the Falkland Islands begins. German singer Nicole wins the Eurovision Song Contest with the song Ein bisschen Frieden. That was a good one. The Weather Channel airs on cable television. The Los Angeles Lakers defeats the Philadelphia 76ers in 6 games. E.T. the Extraterrestrial is released. Not the alien, the movie. The first compact disc CDs are produced in Germany. The first emoticons are posted by Scott Fallman. Thanks, Scott. Michael Jackson releases his 6th studio album, Thriller. Time Magazine's Man of the Year is given for the first time to a non-human. No, not Perry Como. The computer. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get to the important stuff. TV Guides Fall Preview 1982.
Bring 'em back alive. CBS. U.S. adventurer Frank Buck lives in colonial Singapore, set in 1939. He spreads his jungle time between his compound home, the legendary Raffles Hotel, where he parties with H.H., the Sultan of Johor, and wherever adventure takes them. Many adventures include criminals, Nazi agent Von Turgo, and sleazy sycophantic Bundai. Starring Bruce Boxleiter, Clyde Kusatsu, Ron O'Neill, and John A.Z. Lasted 1 season.
Sample episode. Allie is tricked by an old acquaintance, and they both end up captured by a warlord who claims to be a descendant of a Japanese samurai. After the success of Indiana Jones a year earlier, the networks brought out a couple of types of these adventure clones. Shows. Copying? Never.
Cheers, NBC. The regulars of the Boston bar, Cheers, share their experiences and lives with each other while drinking or working at the bar where everybody knows your name. Starring Ted Danson, Shelley Long, Rhea Perlman, John Ratzenberger, George Wendt, Kelsey Grammer, Nicholas Colasanto, Woody Harrelson, Kirstie Alley. Lasted 11 seasons.
Sample episode. Sam is to be interviewed for a sports segment on the evening news. What he doesn't realize is that he was only chosen because all the big-name players weren't available. Okay, usually I zip through these shows because these videos are long enough as they are. But I want to spend some time with Cheers because, obviously, it's one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. After premiering in 1982, it was nearly canceled during its first season when it ranked almost last in ratings, 74th out of 77 shows. NBC honcho Brandon Tartikoff said that Cheers was a sophisticated adult comedy show and that he had never for a second doubted that the show would be renewed. It helped that NBC was the last-placed network and had nothing to replace it with. It was during the summer reruns when Cheers really took off. Glenn and Les Charles and James Burrows, who developed the series, identified themselves as Two Mormons and a Jew. They aimed at creating a show around a Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn type of relationship. If you're too young to know that, look it up. Sam was originally supposed to be a retired football player. Danson had to learn to mix drinks and like sports, as he had no interest in either of them. Its pilot was probably one of the best I had ever seen.
The Devlin Connection, NBC. Brian Devlin was a military intelligence agent. Years ago, he had an affair with a woman named Nicole Corsello. Unaware that she was pregnant, 28 years later, his son, Nick Corsello, a struggling private investigator, sought him out. Nick at first resented his father because he felt that he deserted him, but eventually they developed a bond and become detectives together. Starring Rock Hudson, Jack Scalia, Leah Taylor-Young, and Louis Giambalvo. Lasted half a season.
Sample episode: after two women are murdered back-to-back after frequenting a singles bar, Brian and Nick investigate to follow clues and try to find a motive and a connection to the killer. Production started in 1981, but after several episodes were filmed, it was delayed a year due to Hudson's heart problems. Rock Hudson kept another secret from everyone: his horrible toupee.
Family Ties, NBC. Stephen and Elise Keaton, once 1960s radicals, now find themselves in Reagan-era America trying to raise a traditional suburban family. Their three kids are Alex, a very ambitious young Republican, Mallory, a ditzy and boy-crazy fashionista, and Jennifer, a precocious 9-year-old tomboy. Most of the comedy comes from the conflict between the ex-hippie parents versus the conservative Alex. Starring Michael J. Fox, Meredith Baxter, Michael Gross, Justine Bateman, and Tina Yothers. Lasted 7 years.
Sample episode: it's Thanksgiving at the Keatons, but the turkey dinner might have to wait when Steve and Elise head to an anti-nuclear weapons rally and get arrested, infuriating the kids as well as Elise's parents. I got to see a live taping of Family Ties. Lots of laughs. It was a very well-written show. I unfortunately did not get to meet fellow Canadian Michael J. Fox. The cast wanted to end the show with the entire Keaton family dying in a plane crash. They didn't want to do a reunion show.
Gavilan, NBC. Robert Gavilan is a former CIA agent who is now working for Oceanographic Institute. Once in a while, someone from his past as a spy comes to him asking for his help, which always turns into trouble. Starring Robert Urich, Patrick McNee, and Kate Reed. Taken off the air after 10 episodes. Urich had what was called a high Q score, which in TV network parlance means that the audience likes him. But not this time. Gloria, CBS. This spin-off of All in the Family features the further adventures of Gloria Stivic and her son Joey. She and Michael are separated, and she's gotten a job in a veterinarian's office. Starring Sally Struthers, Burgess Meredith, Joe DeWinter, and Christian Jacobs. Lasted 1 season.
Sample episode: Maggie realizes her mistake when she refuses a lawyer's toaster oven as payment for treating his monkey. Norman Lear had no credited involvement in the show, obviously. 2 pilots were shot. In the second one, Joey adopted a black dog and named him Archie after you-know-who, which Carol O'Connor was rumored to be less than happy about.
It Takes Two, ABC. Sam and Molly Quinn are 2 hard-working career people just too busy with their careers. He's a doctor, she's a lawyer, to pay attention to each other or their teenagers. Starring Richard Crenna, Patty Duke, Billy Bird, Helen Hunt, Anthony Burgess, and Richard McKenzie. Lasted 1 season.
Sample episode: Molly prosecutes a man that killed 6 women and argues for the death penalty. Sam does all he can for a patient who may be near the end of his life. It Takes Two was a very high-quality show created by Susan Harris of Soap, Benson, and Golden Girls fame. It was very much of its time, as Sam was used to having Molly as a traditional housewife, but when she became a DA, he lost those perks. Funnily enough, Crenna played a lefty, and Duke played the righty, which played into the storylines.
Knight Rider, NBC. Billionaire Wilton Knight rescues police detective Lieutenant Michael Arthur Long after a near-fatal shot to the face, giving him a new identity by plastic surgery and a new name, Michael Knight. Michael becomes the primary field agent for the Foundation for Law and Government and gets to drive the Knight Industries 2000, or KIT, a heavily modified, technologically advanced, indestructible Pontiac Firebird Trans Am controlled by artificial intelligence. Starring David Hasselhoff, Edward Mulhare, Richard Basehart, and Patricia McPherson. Lasted 4 glorious seasons.
Sample episode. Michael and Kit join a stunt show, which a wealthy banker is trying to force out of business. It doesn't take long for them to become the main attraction, even if Kit has to face the undignified distinction of being decorated all over with stars. I want to first point out that when you have a unique premise, you can do unique storylines. Only 35% critics score on Rotten Tomatoes, but an 89% audience score. Clearly, the Hoff ruled. General Motors supplied all the Firebirds they needed for free. The main car cost $100,000 to build, and that's the equivalent of $266,000 today. You could tell this show was fake because the Firebird was reliable. For the scenes in which Kit appeared to be driving without a driver, stuntman Jack Gill would sit behind the driver's seat, extend his arms and his legs through the front seat out of sight. Knight Rider was awful in that Glenn Larson way, but I loved it.
Mama Maloney, CBS. Not going to dive too deeply into this as the premise is simple. There's a mama and her name is Maloney. It starred Leela Kay, but it was removed from the 1982 season and pushed to the spring of 1984, where it lasted only 13 episodes. Matt Houston, ABC. Matt is a wealthy Texan who moves to California to oversee his family's offshore drilling enterprises, but spends most of his time dabbling in his private investigator hobby. The show also features his female lawyer's sidekick, CJ, starring Lee Horsley and Pamela Hensley. Lasted 3 seasons.
Sample episode. When a fashion designer is murdered, the prime suspect is a model who happens to be Houston's ex. She turns to him for help. When this show came out, we all screamed, "Magnum clone!" But Horsley brought his own charm to the show. Most episodes were about his friends getting into trouble.
Newhart, CBS. Dick Loudon, an author of do-it-yourself and travel books, he and his wife Joanne moved from New York City to a small town in rural Vermont to operate the 200-year-old Stratford Inn, starring Bob Newhart, Mary Fran, Tom Poston, Julia Duffy, Peter Scolari, William Sanderson, Tony Pappenfuss, and John Volstadt. Lasted 8 seasons.
Sample episode. Dick and Joanne are horrified to discover a 300-year-old grave in their basement belonging to a woman who was hanged as a witch. Once again, location and premise create stories. This was one of the best-loved sitcoms of all time. We all remember Larry, Daryl, and Daryl, which were only written to appear once, but the studio audience reaction was so overwhelming, they became regulars. Interesting fact is that the first season was a multi-video camera shoot that Newhart hated. Season 2 and on were filmed on film. and had a radical overhaul with new characters. Of course, the show is remembered as the series with the most memorable final episode, bringing back Suzanne Plachette, that was actually kept secret from the rest of the cast. One last thing I wanted to add: if you watch the show now, there are an awful lot of jokes Dick does at the expense of Joanne that are extremely cruel and mean-spirited. I guess they thought they were funny at the time.
The New Odd Couple, ABC, an African-American remake of the television series inspired by the Neil Simon play about two friends living together despite their complete disparate attitudes to life. Starring Ron Glass and DeMond Wilson. Lasted 1 season.
Sample episode: the money Felix entrusts to Oscar for a cemetery plot deposit becomes ready cash for Oscar's gambling. The show never really clicked for me. It was produced by Gary Marshall, but Ron Glass was a bit too fly for Felix, and DeMond was not enough of a slob as Oscar.
The Powers of Matthew Starr. NBC. Matthew Starr was a prince on the planet Quadris who was forced to flee to Earth when his planet's government was overthrown by despots. On Earth, he took the form of an ordinary high school student, albeit one with superpowers, and was accompanied by his guardian, Walt, who became the school science teacher. The American government knew of Matthew and Walt's origin and used them to act as agents. Starring Peter Barton and Louis Gossett Jr. Lasted 1 season.
Sample episode: nerdy student Monica Kraft has created a paint which seems to interfere with Matt's powers. Matt and Walt have to neutralize it before it's mass-produced. They also discover that it's unexpectedly explosive. Matt asks Monica out for a date. Totally believable. For only a 1-season run, many people have fond memories of this show. As an aficionado of bad sci-fi, it was too horrible even for me.
The Quest, ABC. The sovereign state of Glendora has a problem. It seems that through an old agreement with France, unless there's a monarch, the country would revert to France, and the king has no heirs. So they found 4 Americans who are descendants of one of the former rulers. So they're sent out on a quest to show if they have the qualities necessary to be a ruler. Starring Perry King, Noah Beery Jr., John Rhys Davies, Michael Billington. Oh, doesn't matter. Lasted 9 episodes. Remington Steele, NBC. Private Eye Laura Holt can't land any work because potential clients refuse to hire a woman. Grudgingly, Laura invents a fictitious male boss, Remington Steele. She hires a former con man who assumes the identity of her fictitious boss. Together, the two battle crime and each other. Starring Stephanie Zimbalist, Pierce Brosnan, and Doris Roberts. Lasted 5 sexy seasons.
Sample episode: Ms. Holt and Mr. Steele disagree on whether to provide security for a cursed painting. Ms. Holt's interfering mother comes for an annoying visit. What a great show this was. Zimbalist and Brosnan were a fantastic pairing. I should mention that my wife and I have a pact that if Pierce shows up at our door, my wife is allowed to go away with him. For me, it's Mila Jovovich.
Ripley's Believe It or Not, ABC, strange occurrences, odd historical facts, and unusual artistic and social activities are explored. Starring Jack Palance and Holly Palance. Lasted 4 seasons. Really? Next. St. Elsewhere, NBC. The lives and work of the staff of St. Eligius Hospital, an old and disrespected Boston teaching hospital. Starring Ed Begley Jr., Denzel Washington, William Daniels, David Morse, Christina Pickles, Eric Laneville, Norman Lloyd, Ed Flanders, Stephen Furst, and many, many more. Lasted 6 seasons.
Sample episode. Morrison has a struggle with his conscience when he has to treat a bombing suspect. Ehrlich is nervous about having to work with Dr. Craig. Samuels teaches Beale how to swim. St. Elsewhere was another MTM show. It was often called the medical version of Hill Street Blues, and deservedly so. It's one of my favorite all-time shows, mixing drama with humor. It's up there for me with The Prisoner, Sopranos, and The Sandbaggers as all-time best series. Ironically, it was not a popular show. It never rose above 47th place in the ratings. However, it was popular with the affluent 18 to 49 demographic. When Dr. Elliot Axelrod killed the horrible Mrs. Hufnagel, I almost died.
7 Brides for 7 Brothers, CBS. An American musical television series loosely based on the 1954 film of the same name, starring Richard Dean Anderson, Roger Wilson, Peter Horton, and River Phoenix. Lasted a whole season, believe it or not. I have nothing more to say. Silver Spoons, NBC. Ricky Stratton is a spoiled rich kid who lives the life that many kids dream of, but he still suffers from the problems that many teens do, starring Ricky Schroeder, Aaron Gray, and Joel Higgins, with Alfonso Ribeiro showing up 2 seasons in. Lasted 5 seasons.
Sample episode. Ricky gets his first taste of puppy love when a new girl transfers to his school. This was a hugely popular show that I never watched.
Square Pegs, CBS. Welcome to Weema-Wee High School, where being in the right clique can make one's year in school memorable. Enter Patty Green and Lauren Hutchison, 2 freshmen who try hard to be accepted into the cliques. The only problem is that they stand out like sore thumbs. Patty is brainy and wears glasses, and Lauren is overweight and has braces. Thankfully, 2 other square pegs accept them, starring Sarah Jessica Parker, Amy Linker, Merritt Buttrick, John Farina, Tracy Nelson, Jamie Gertz, Claudette Wells, and John Caleri. Lasted 1 season.
Sample episode. The class clown Marshall becomes addicted to the new arcade game that has arrived on campus. His friend, Johnny, is concerned and looks to Father Guido Sarducci, played by Don Novello, for help. The show was created by Ann Beats and was absolutely brilliant and very popular, but the show's cancellation after only 1 season was something of a surprise. It was later revealed that the show's cancellation was due to revelations of rampant on-set drug use by the cast and crew members. One cast member was quoted as saying, "The girls were out of control. They were doing drugs and they were making out and they were coming on to us in a big way." I don't know. That just sounds like standard Hollywood operating procedure to me.
Star of the Family, ABC. Fire Captain Buddy Krebs' 16-year-old daughter, Jenny Lee, begins getting show business offers because of her singing talents in the country pop genre. This scares Buddy because he does not want his daughter to grow up too fast. Adding to his troubles are his wife runs off with a bellhop, his 17-year-old son has muscle instead of brains, his crew down at the firehouse are strange. Starring Brian Dennehy, Catherine Salzberg. Oh, it doesn't matter. It lasted only 10 episodes.
When a show's description takes longer to explain than its run, you're in trouble.
Tales of the Gold Monkey. ABC. Jake Cutter is a pilot and adventurer in Bora Bora, the port in the Maravella Islands in 1938. He flies his Grumman Goose amphibian on inter-island flights and finds adventure every week. Starring Stephen Collins, Jeff McKay, Marta Dubois, John Fujioka, and Roddy McDowell. Lasted 1 season.
Sample episode. A mysterious sailor calling himself Captain Ahab comes to Bora Bora and kidnaps Corky, forcing him to fix a broken part on Ahab's ship. Despite suffering from malaria, Jake goes after them. This was a fun show, and another failure for the handsome snake-bit Collins.
Tucker's Witch, CBS. Rick and Amanda Tucker are a married couple who own and operate their own private detective agency. Her psychic powers are a tremendous asset in solving cases, although they also have a tendency to get them into trouble. Starring Tim Matheson, Catherine Hicks, Bill Morey, Alfre Woodard, and Barbara Barry. Lasted a season.
Sample episode. A stolen Indian artifact nicknamed the Toltec Death Mask indirectly leads to a series of murders when the archaeologist who stole it tries to sell it. Originally, the show was called The Good Witch of Laurel Canyon and starred Art Hindle and Kim Cattrall, two fine, upstanding Canadians. But because of Cattrall's racy scene in Porky's and Art Hindle also being in it, it caused CBS to ditch the two actors.
Voyagers, NBC. Phineas Bogg is one of a society of time travelers called Voyagers, who, with the help of a young boy named Jeffrey Jones from 1982, uses a handheld device called an Omni, which looks much like a large pocket watch that flashes red when the history is wrong and green when the timeline is corrected, to travel in time and ensure that history unfolds as we know it. Starring John Eric Hexum and Mina Palouse. Lasted one season.
Sample episode. In colonial Massachusetts, Phineas and Jeffrey must save themselves and Benjamin Franklin's mother from charges of witchcraft. It was a fun show that did shockingly well up against CBS's 60 Minutes on Sunday, but NBC, in its infinite wisdom, replaced Voyagers with a news show called Monitor, which died. Another bit of trivia, Hexum accidentally killed himself by firing a pistol with a blank in it. So far, in my TV Guide journeys, this has been the best so far. Even most of the failed shows made it through at least one season. As spectacularly dumb as some of them were, as you heard. Overall, this was a fantastic year for must-see TV. Looking into my TV Guide crystal ball for 1983, it looks like they used up all the good shows for 82. Till next time, denizens, be seeing you.